Over a year after Microsoft and 343 Industries originally planned, Halo Infinite is now just a couple of days from release. It's a return of the iconic first-person shooter franchise and a bold step into new territory for Master Chief. With a new, more open-world design than ever before, a far less linear structure and a need to scale from the original Xbox One all the way up to this Xbox Series X and the high-end PCs that you can get these days, this is a huge technical challenge for 343 Industries to undertake. Of course, as a flagship first-party title, it also needs to be leading the way and showing just what all of these systems and platforms are capable of. So, how does it hold up? We've had advanced review code of Halo Infinite to test, courtesy of Microsoft. This isn't the exact day one build that you have on the 8th of December, and it comes with a proviso that there could be some changes for launch. However, we've got to take that this is a representative of the experience that you'll get on day one. For our testing, we have an original Xbox One, an Xbox One X, which has both quality and performance modes, and an Xbox Series X, where we're able to test the standard 4K 60 FPS quality mode, though there is also a 120 FPS mode. Sadly, we don't have an Xbox Series S in for testing on this occasion, which would be extremely interesting to see in comparison to the One X. Regardless of the system, Halo Infinite is a very interesting game, as 343 Industries tackle open world design for the first time. You have this wider world than you've ever seen before, though it's nowhere near as plainly open as in Far Cry or Assassin's Creed. As you capture FOBs that are held by the Banished, they then become UNSC bases once more, where you can fast travel to them, call in vehicles, stock up on weapons, and grab some UNSC buddies to hop into your ride and accompany you into battle. You can see some of the foundations of co-op play here and throughout the experience, even though the game is not shipping with campaign co-op at launch. As you pull up the map and the upgrade screen and more, it does not pause the game, but allows combat to continue to run in the background, just as you would expect from a game when there's two people running around in an open world. You can, however, still pause the game fully with the menu button. Something that is atypical of this setup, though, is that it allows you to simply fast travel from the middle of combat. Comparing the different consoles, the first thing that is clearly different between them is the resolution. Xbox One is the absolute runt of the litter with a lower resolution than Xbox One X on performance mode, and that's not surprising in the slightest though, and it's pretty much what we've seen over the last few years, where the One X is just so much more powerful than the original 2013 console. Then comparing the Xbox One X quality mode to the Xbox Series X, and they feel really quite close. The Series X is able to take what the One X does at 30 FPS and push that frame rate up to 60 FPS, while additionally being able to render more detail on objects as it's loaded in and various other visual techniques. There is some variance here and there in terms of things like draw distance and the actual resolution with dynamic resolution scaling and more, but there's the general feel that the One X is able to come close to the Series X in terms of quality. One thing that we did note from our open world running was that when there's, for example, an enemy emplacement just out in the open world, the one that we're highlighting here is from an assassination target, all of the barricades here, the general detritus, and the enemies, they all pop in at roughly the same point across all three systems. There's just different levels of detail on the objects that are generated. You might have expected the Series X to be able to stretch this out to render these elements from further off into the distance, but that's not the case on this occasion. For the framerate analysis, let's start with the Xbox Series X. As you'd hope, it is a nigh on flawless 60 FPS across the board, with just very occasional single frame blips here and there. If you have this system to play on, then Halo Infinite is an absolute joy. And that means that we can quickly move on to the second best experience, which, for my money, comes on the Xbox One X with performance mode. This drops that dynamic resolution range to between 1440p and 1080p to enable the console to shoot for 60 FPS. And it's absolutely worth doing so for a much more responsive shooter experience. However, that frame rate is not a locked 60 by any means. During indoor sections, it's pretty steady, but out in the open world, it will vary significantly, often heading down towards 50 FPS and on some occasions down to the 40s. The game would likely need to be able to drop below 1080p with its DRS range in order to sustain that 60 FPS target. Still, this is preferable to the game on either Xbox One or in the One X quality mode. In both cases, they are targeting 30 FPS, but the frame rate is just a bit unsteady, and it's the frame pacing that is the main issue here. You can see that in the frame time chart that we're rendering. There's an inconsistency here, so that even if the game is at 30 FPS, it feels like there's micro stutters going on as you're playing. That is hopefully something that 343 are able to remedy through updates, but then having said that, this is something that is still an issue with the multiplayer as well. The One X quality mode does manage to hover at 30 FPS pretty well, with a DRS window of 2160p down to 1440p. The base Xbox One has a window that goes down from 1080p to just 540p. And that, sadly, is not actually low enough to stay at 30 FPS in all situations. Certain more intense open world situations will still drop the game down to the mid-20s instead of 29 FPS, 30 FPS. We did try to run the game from an SSD to see if that might help, but any difference to the core gameplay was minimal at best. So this isn't really down to the storage and the data streaming, this is the various bottlenecks of what is now a seriously underpowered Xbox One, and it's a huge tumble from what Halo 5 was able to achieve with its much more constrained design. That game targeted 60 FPS across the board, but the design goals were completely different, and for Halo Infinite, having the open world, the streaming in of assets, the dynamic lighting and day-night cycle, the larger freeform battle spaces, where there's the potential for more AI enemies and friendlies, it's all a huge shift from that last Halo game, and it imposes much greater demands. So, from a performance standpoint, Halo Infinite is a game that follows so many of the narratives that we've seen play out across the generations and revisions of Xbox console, with the base Xbox One significantly inferior to any of its much more powerful siblings. Having said that, the gameplay does remain fun and engaging. The game realises this broader and much more open world than we've ever seen before, and well, it's Halo. It's just a Halo that you want to play on an Xbox One X or an Xbox Series console. That's all that we've got for this video, but make sure to like, subscribe and share before you go. You can also head over to the6axis.com where we've got our review, and you can check that out before the game launches on the 8th of December across Xbox Series X, Xbox One and PC. Hopefully we will see you again soon, and until then, goodbye.